welcome to the first introduction video for Book March Madness. Now in each of these introduction videos, you're going to be introduced to the titles that have been selected to fill one of the conferences or genres in our Book March Madness bracket, and today we are starting with the classics. I'm really excited about this one because I consider myself to be a bit of a classics enthusiast. Most of these titles I have either read or read an abridged version of, so I'm fairly familiar with most of these titles, but I'm also excited because this is the bracket that I'm probably going to be watching most closely, because unlike the other three brackets, which are fantasy, sci-fi, mystery, thriller, and romance, the new releases or the rookies in this conference or genre are not based on Goodreads voting. They are books that various reading lists and book reviews have heralded as books that will eventually become classics that kids will read in schools, that will be used in various forms of education, just the books that will become teaching literature in the future. And they're going up against some pretty big juggernauts of literature already. In each of these introduction videos, we will start with the champions and then move on to the rookies. First up, we have kind of a fantasy classic, an adventure classic, if you will, much beloved by adults and children alike. It is Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. This one, I have no doubt, will be moderately successful because I feel like this is a title that is well known by a lot of people. We've seen various movie adaptations, things like Treasure Planet, that are very loosely based on its story content. It was an influential story, and Robert Louis Stevenson is an incredible author. Next, we have a political commentary, because I feel like we can't really have a classics genre without a political commentary. There were just too many of them written in the day, and so we have Animal Farm by George Orwell. This is actually one of the few on this genre that I have not read. I'm excited because it is on my list to read later in the year. So I may get to read it earlier than expected if it makes it through to the Elite 8, which will become my April TBR, but I'm excited to see how well this one does. Again, George Orwell, very famous author, much beloved by many people. Next, we have what I consider to be one of the great American classics, and that is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Again, I feel like I don't have to say much about this book because, you know, Leonardo DiCaprio. I personally really love this book. It's one of my all-time favorite classics, but there are a lot of people who find it incredibly boring. If you watched my bad reviews of good books video back last year, I think I did it, this was one of them in the classic genre that had several bad reviews, but I know that it is beloved by a lot of people, so I'm hoping that it does well. We'll have to see. Next is actually one of the others that I have not read in this genre, and that is The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. I don't know why I feel like this book is very popular with teenage boys. I don't know why, it's just the vibe I get. I just feel like this book has sort of made a resurgence again in popularity, and so I'm excited to maybe hopefully read it. We'll see how it does. I have to say before I continue that the classics genre can expand to encompass a lot of other different genres. So you can have classic works of mystery, thriller, romance, and there were quite a few that I picked for other genres that could have very well gone in the classic genre, but this is one that I thought was so cutting edge. It really paved the way for a new era of the mystery thriller genre that it just had to be included in the classic genre, and that is In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. Again, I have read this one, but it is also on a reading list for later in the year, so if it wins and makes it to the Elite 8, I'll be reading it again. Next, we have another one of my all-time favorites, Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. This was iconic. I think this probably was the first big classic I ever read in my lifetime. I read it pretty early on in high school, and yeah, it's so good. So I'm personally rooting for this one. It will most likely probably get my vote once we get to that point of voting, so I'm excited to see how this one does. I had to throw one controversial title in there due to content, and that is Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. Oh, it's problematic material, especially in today's day and age, but it is also a one-of-a-kind novel that many people have read and commented on, and they either love or they hate passionately. You know, it's one of the two, so you gotta have a controversial title in there. Next, we have another favorite of mine, and one book that I try to read every year, or at least part of, and that is A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. This is to me is just such a heartwarming story. I know it's a very dark material, but I just feel good when I read it because it is one of my all-time favorite stories. I discovered about myself over the past year that I'm becoming a bit of a Francophile. And maybe it is because that Tale of Two Cities is one of my favorite books of all time. But it's Charles Dickens, and it's so good. We had to have, you know, international authors. It can't just be America. And who better to pick than English-born Charles Dickens? Moving on to the rookies. A reminder, again, not all of these were printed within the past 2 years. Some of them are actually fairly old, if you want to put it that way. But they are books that people predict will become classics in the future. So without further ado, let's meet the rookies. First up, we have a book that is a sweeping booktube bookstagram by storm. It's very popular over the past couple years, and that is The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. This has been on my TBR shelf for several years now. Still have not read it. I got it as a gift, I think for Christmas a few years ago, and we had to have a little bit of the classic historical fiction in there. Several other those titles could play into that genre as well, but I think this is really a pinnacle of an era, and it deserves its place in the sort of upper echelons of literature. So I'm excited to see how this rookie will handle being put up against some of the champions of literature. Next, we have a fairly new release, which is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. This is another one of those that I have not read yet, but I have heard nothing but good things about this book. And because I don't know anything about it, and it's not really one that's ever been on my radar, I want to know how it's going to do compared to the bigger titles, because I feel like this book has a pretty staunch following, and this author as well, so I'm excited to see what will happen. Next we have another one of my favorites. Read this in college. I have not read the full trilogy, but this is Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel, all about Henry VIII. Oh man, what a dude. I feel like, again, this sort of had a huge sweep, like a re-rise in popularity. One, because Hilary Mantel just published the third and final book in the trilogy last year, but also Six, the musical on Broadway, is a thing. So Henry VIII has sort of made not a resurgence in popularity. I don't want to promote him that much, but his wives certainly did. So this book is all about his story, and I loved it. It was a great work of literary historical fiction, and again, I'm excited to see how it holds up. This is another one that I have not read yet, however, I have heard good things. This is The Underground Railroad by Colson, Whitehead. Again, kind of like Where the Crawdads Sing, it's not a book that necessarily was on my radar, mostly because I don't read a lot of historical or literary fiction. And that's not because I don't like it, I just never really pick up that genre. So this one has, I think, a very staunch following, and it is relatively newer in the releases than some of the other titles in this genre. And next, we have kind of a kingpin of coming-of-age literature mixed with contemporary fiction, and that is Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. Gail Honeyman. I have heard good things, I have heard not so good things, but from the most part I've heard that this book is exceptional. Again, coming-of-age literature is not something that I read all that often. I have read excerpts of this, I've never read the whole thing. I think I downloaded the audiobook back when it first came out and maybe listened to part of it and then just got distracted by other things. But again, I am excited to see how this one does, because I know, again, Gail Honeyman is kind of one of those authors that has a bit of a cult following, and her writing gets rave reviews, and so I have no doubt will hold its own in this competition. Next, we have a book that I again read in college, and it made me cry, and that is The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. It is so good. It is about, I'm not even going to tell you what it's about because I'd be here for 3 days. If you love Downton Abbey and historical fiction, this is the book for you. Kazuo Ishiguro is an exceptional writer. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature for this book. He has written several other books that are exceptional. The movie is incredible. It's such a heartbreaking but beautiful story. And again, this is a rookie that I am rooting for. And I'm excited to see how it does, because for whatever reason, this is a book that I feel like I love a lot, but I don't know if other people love it as much as I do, or are even aware of it as much as I am. So again, it's one I'm rooting for. I'm not really anticipating it doing well. That's my own opinion, but it will 100% get my vote. And again, we have a relatively recent publication, which is A Man Called Uwe by Fredrik Backman. The man is killing it right now. He has so many titles out that are beloved. There was a new release pretty recently. This one has been out for, I want to say, a few years. Don't quote me on that. My mom's obsessed with him right now. She got several of his newer books for Christmas. People love him. He is such an incredible slice of life author that is so good at narration and telling story and universe building. I'm excited to see how the popular one is what I would call him, the popular rookie, if we want to get into superlatives, how he's going to do and hold up against some of the champions of this genre. Again, we have another big one, which is The Help by Kathryn Stockett. I actually have never read this book in its entirety either. I feel like I'm saying that a lot, but I promise you that this is the genre that I have read the most titles in. The first time I watched this movie was, I was on a 14-hour flight from Vancouver, Canada to Sydney, Australia, on my way to visit family in New Zealand, and it broke me. I was sitting next to a businessman, and I'm sure he probably thought that I was falling apart, which I was, crying to this movie, and so I am really excited to see. I know this book has a staunch following. Kathryn Stockett also has a staunch following. I'm excited for this one. That's it. Those are the 16 titles in the classics bracket. And so now we have reached the end of the video. Well, almost. I have to do the outro. But at the end of this video, you will have 48 hours to suggest a title that you think belongs in this bracket. That's exactly right. If you think I'm sleeping on a title, or you think I missed one completely that you think belongs in here as an iconic work of literature, you have 48 hours to tell me what you think it is. There will be a Google form link down in the description of this video for you to go submit your title. It will also be on the Book March Madness website, which will also be linked down in the description. Again, you only have 48 hours for this to begin, and the voting period expires on March 6th at 10 a.m., which will be around the time that the next introduction video is released. So again, 48 hours, so go to it. So again, you want to participate in adding to these genres and crafting the entire bracket before we begin voting, now's your chance. If you have any questions about how Book March Madness works or is working, please feel free to comment them down below or message me on Leighellens Library on Instagram. I will be happy to answer any questions you have. Again, check out the Book March Madness website. It will give you a schedule as well as explanations, and that was the other important thing that I forgot to say. After this video is over, you can go check out the classics page on the Book March Madness site. All of these titles and their descriptions will be up there for you to peruse and review and make your predictions. They will not be ranked. That will happen on March 13th on our Selection Sunday. So you can find out which titles are going up against which titles. But for now, get familiar with what the books are about and what can be expected. I can't wait to introduce the other 3 genres, which again are coming on March 6th, March 9th, and March 11th, all around the 8 o'clock hour. Again, 48 hours, go submit your titles. I want you to participate and have a hand in crafting this bracket with me. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give this video a like and subscribe to my booktube channel. It really does help me out and let me know what you guys want to see. And as always, a huge thank you to the friends and family who have readily supported me on this journey, full of questions and reviews. Your feedback means the world to me, and I can't wait to see what's on the next page. Cheers.